welcome to week 3 of the geraniums. Today we're going to focus in on leaves. If you're new to following me, subscribe on YouTube or like me on Facebook. I have a weekly newsletter that I put in tips and tricks, and this week I focused in on why you take pictures in cloudy days when you're taking pictures of birds, and I show what examples are when you've got really bright light and when you've got nice cloudy days. So go over to my website at dancingravenstudio.ca and join the newsletter there. We're just going to get painting right away to these leaves because I'm almost to the end of this painting, and you know the impatience is climbing. So let's get going. Okay, so you can see here that I am, I'm just going to move things over here. So we're going to talk about the different colors I'm using for the leaves, and look at my poor little palette that I've been working with for a while. It's not particularly clean or pretty, but it does what it needs to do. So we have Hooker's Green, we have Burnt Umber, we have Neutral Tint, we have New Gamboge, I have a little Areolan, sometimes I need a little bit brighter yellow, and I have a Phthalo Green blue shade here for those really sort of bluer spaces than this green can make. It's quite a bit bluer, and that's what I'm working with today. I'll take that paper off so that it doesn't I don't want my palette to make anything messy, so I'm just we're going to work over here, and you can see what we've got done. So here's where I'm at. In fact, I've been painting for the last hour on here while I've been waiting for my time to come. I'm getting faster at getting organized for these. So I've just been painting and adding layer after layer a little bit and building up on what I've been working on so far. So let's go over here. Let's start. Yeah, I'm going to start this way. I'm going to work in this area for a bit and then keep working across. Again, I have my little piece of watercolor paper. It's the same paper that I use for here, the 140-pound paper. It's just a scrap. And I am here and moving. So I'm going to take that Hooker's Green, and I'm going to take a little bit of the Neutral Tint and the Burnt Umber, and I'm going to make a really dark green. I want a low chroma green. And we're just going to come into this space here, and it comes down. So a low chroma green just means it's still green, but it's not a bright green. And I'll show you the difference between a high chroma green, a full chroma green, and a low chroma green. Just give me a second here. So a full chroma green is when it's just almost acidy. And when you first start painting, one of the challenges we have is we're looking at photos, or we're trying to figure out how to get from that green to maybe the green that we're seeing, which is a really low chroma green. It's still green, but it's way more grayed out. So I do that by adding Burnt Umber, a little bit of Neutral Tint to this green, and I thin it like it just until it comes to this gray green that's perfect for the darker areas. So if you're here on Facebook, say hello. And if you're on YouTube, I would love to hear from you too. I've got both of them open so I can see comments. And I will try and turn my head and pay attention to it. Okay, now I can see there's some of that dark, but I've just put some of the light in there. So I'm going to wait for that to dry a bit. And I'm going to come back and I can see my edge is doing something really weird here. So I'm just going to pull that back. And then I'm going to, okay, here we go. Grab a cloth. I forgot to get that right beside me and just touch it so that it's in the shape that I want it to be. Again, you know, it's leaves. Who's going to know if it's not in the perfect shape? So I've got a darker space here. Let's just build that up. Clean my brush, dry it off, and then gently tickle the edge to soften it and put it in the shape that I'm looking for. Come up and do that again. Yeah, okay. Let's grab some of that low chroma darker green and put it in here. And I can see that it's pretty solidly there, but it comes up a little bit and it comes into a green that is higher chroma. It has more green in it. I'm still going to add just a touch of each of these colors. And I'm going to just keep adding a little bit more green so that I can bring it to, no, it needs to be a little brighter than that yet. A little bit more green. There. That seems a little bit more yellow maybe in there. Okay. So let's build that next stage in. You see that I'm not touching it? What I'm going to do is come in and just tickle the edges so that they blend together just a little bit. I don't want that lighter green to go flowing really fast into it. And I can see that there's a little bit of that really blue-green at the top with a lot of yellow. So let's just take a little tiny bit of this. And that is where I've added in a different green. I've taken the phthalo green blue shade because it's so much more intense and so much bluer, and added it into the top part here. So you're slowly building up an understanding. I'm not worried about going fast. That's not my goal. My goal is to get the shape as correct as I can and then to continue on. And there's lots of work to be done here. I'm just doing bits and pieces of it. Okay, I'm just mixing up some more of that low chroma grayed out green. And it's very intense, so let's add some water to it to thin it out. You know, that's the thing I like about watercolor, is that you add water and it gets lighter. And it gives you the time to slowly work. And if you have too much water, like I have right now, I can come in with a thirsty brush and just touch most of it away. And all I did was I clean my brush, dry it off with my cloth, and come and take some of that water out. Too much water makes it hard to manage to control, and we want to be in control of this as best we can, because it is watercolor, and watercolor does have a mind of its own sometimes. Okay, I'm going to take a little bit of that yellowy green just as the transition. I'm going to come in with a thirsty brush, touch the edge, and touch it down, and build that shape. And it will get closer and closer as I do my different layers. So this one is quite dark here. So let's get some of that grayed down darker green and just put it in here. I can see that this area is lighter, but I can come back to that as this dries and becomes more of what I'm looking for. So I've been out birding a couple of times this week. I was in a collector's backyard, and we were hoping that the ducks that hang around in her little lake she has right in the middle of town, it's just this fabulous space, would come closer, but they were not very cooperative, as birds are not always very cooperative. So my plan is to go today and do some more of that, because it's kind of cloudy out, and that, if you got my newsletter, you could see the difference between what it's like to go on a cloudy day to take pictures of birds and what it's like on a sunny day. That makes a huge difference to, I'm just going to float in a little bit of glow right here. So when I float in a color, it's going to have a little bit more water in it, and I'm doing that on purpose because I want it to push away the other paint and create that little hint of change, that color difference, that value difference that will give that little bit of space a little extra glow. Okay, so we have some beautiful bright greeny, and I'm using a little bit of that yellow with the phthalo green blue shade. That's so pretty. Such a perfect color for the underneath glow. So is anybody here? Hello. It's just the Thursday before a long weekend. I'm sure everybody's getting ready to go and do things. We're not in that mode this long weekend. So I'm going to come in and just softly, I'm looking at the shape here, and I'm going to just bring that together. Then I'm going to bring that darkness in again. Yeah, we're looking forward to the August long weekend. It looks like it's going to be a glorious weekend here. So I'm happy with that dark. You can see that here. It's pretty close to where I need it to be. There's lots of work that needs to be done yet, but it's not bad. Okay, so let's leave this to dry. And then I'm going to come in over here. Again, with that phthalo blue green shade in the yellows, I'm going to bring in that glow that's right here. I'm going to soften the edges. Okay, and let that just be. I want that to be, because what I'm doing is setting that glow. Now I have a really pretty yellow up here, so I want to make sure I've got enough yellow there to sort of push around and move it around. And then I have that pretty glow with the phthalo green blue color, and it just adds so much, like, it's such a pretty glowing color. And when I get the next layers into it, you'll start to see what I'm thinking about while I'm doing that. Because right now it's just, well, it is what it is. It's get some of that glow. just, oh, and I see there's some of that yellow again. So I've got a mixture of the Areolan and the New Gamboge to bring in that brighter yellow. And it's just the yellow, it's nothing else. So we're just building up coming down here and then taking that phthalo green blue with the yellow that's so nice and clear and bright and adding it in. And it can be just, yeah. Okay, get some of that yellow and just do this tip here and that yellow. Ooh, I got a fluffy there. So the Areolan and the New Gamboge make a really pretty glowy yellow. And then again with the phthalo blue green and the combination of those two yellows to get to that color that we're looking for, that glow. And I'm just going to go right over. I've got a fluffy there. Okay, just come on, fluffy, get on my brush so I can to get a clean brush. Maybe if I have a dry brush, it will pick that up. Dust is a challenge sometimes. Okay, got it. Okay, so let's take some of that green and that yellow and bring it down here. I don't want it that bright, I just want it glowing, so I just clean my brush, dry it off. Now I'm going to get some yellow here and pull that down along the edge. It doesn't matter if I go over other parts that you can see I've started creating the shape here. That's going to be dark, so we're going from lightest to darkest while we're working. And we're really thinking about what that means and trying to stick within that, those shapes and our focus. Okay, so we have some of that yellow glowing over on this petal here. So I'm going to bring in some of that yellow. Bring it down here. Bring it in here because it's just on the edges. It's not the whole thing, but because we're able to paint dark to over top, we're not worried about it. Okay, so I'm going to just leave that there and let that dry. Soften the edge, get it into there. Up here there's some of that bright glowing, so let's get that going here. Some yellow and some of the phthalo green with the yellow. And again here we've got the yellow happening. Okay, just keep on working, just keep on trucking. I can see that there's some of that pretty bright greeny yellow right in there. And I have to pay attention because now I'm getting into light areas. When I'm in dark areas, I can go right over. That makes no difference because I'm going to put another layer on. But if you're in a light area, you don't want to do that. Oh, I'm really happy with that shape. So let's bring in some of that lower chroma, darker green and bring that down. And it's a softened edge. So one end is a little harder, but the other side is softer. So to soften the edge, oops, I have somebody at the door. that I have to ignore. You might hear Maggie, our alarm clock, our door alarm going off upstairs. And there's nobody here to be able to go answer that door. Hey, so the other places we have green are over here. Okay. And we're going to bring in some of the variations of that green, a lighter version of it. Dogs. Another week, guys, another week, and she will be in her own place with our son. So this is exciting. If anybody wants my attention, I'm not able to answer the door. So there you go. Okay, so bring that around. Interesting. Oh, so whoever's there is not being insistent because I'm, yeah. Okay, so slowly I'm building up and I'm moving around the my painting because I can do that, and that's really excellent. It's very helpful. So some of this green is more towards the browny red. So I've got a little bit of the quinacridone red on my green palette, just a touch of it. So I can float it in. I can float it in. There we go. Now, if I get too much, I have a little bit of time to pull and play with it. So let's just pull and play with it. And we're going to pull it up. It's quite dark, so we'll keep adding more and more. Okay. So take some of that green and flow it in, and you can see it kind of came to one point and just stopped. I'm just going to touch my brush to it. And then I'm going to get some of that red again because I want to float it in while it's wet. And I'm just going to, because I can see there's a bit of that red there. It's a small space, so it can easily be overwhelmed. So just taking the very tip of this brush, I'm going to pull that down. Okay, there we go. Now, I'm not going to touch anything else on there. I don't, well, I might have time. I might have time here. Let's move a little quickly here. I had to turn off and turn on my camera. So I'm going to pull that down because I can see that it gets darker, but it's still fairly green. So I want to bring in more of that area, that the green, the hooker's green, that's more chromatic and more towards, not quite so so grayed out. And I can see I can come down here again. I'm going to do the same thing where I'm going to float some red in here, and I'm sure that the red is being reflected off of the petals, and that's why we're seeing it in the green, is because it's being reflected off of the petals and onto the little leaf. There we go. And then this area is light, so I'm just gonna soften this edge a bit and soften that between so that it goes right to the very edge of the leaf, and carefully just tickling it with the edge of my brush. It's not the value I need it to be yet, but it's getting closer. It's looking more dimensional. It's looking more interesting. We have, I need that to dry, so I can't do that. And let's add some of that darker over here. And I've got a hard edge that it's going against, so I'm going to come in and just touch that edge and soften it a bit. And I'm going to think about the fact that there's a little bit of the red being reflected back from the petals onto that. Okay, we'll leave that there. Okay, I have this up here that has more chroma on the green. It's catching a little bit of the light, so that's still so let's back that up. Let's back that up. I'm not pleased with that. That's too much. So I just took my cloth and I used my just the tip of my brush to add a little bit more of that green in. Okay. And then we have really dark greens. These petals over here are quite dark, that they're still showing up underneath all of those little florets. And it also has that glow to it of the red being bounced back into these leaves. It's always the interesting part is where does color move when struck by light, and how it reflects back in and is noticeably red. It's not just a little, it's a hint of red, but it's still pretty noticeable. I'm going to come down here. I'm going to let that dry a little bit, because what I'm seeing is I want to soften that edge, but I don't want to soften it too much and pull too much paint. So let's go up to this one here. I'm going to take a little bit of that brighter, higher chroma green mixture, and I'm going to take then the lower chroma green mixture, which is with the burnt umber and neutral tint, and I'm going to just touch the edge there so that it blends together. It's the first of many layers, so I'm just going to continue working. There, and we have that. See in the center, when I get back into doing the flowers, once the leaves are all done and I can compare it, there are small little areas that still need to be tweaked, and I'm going to work on that later. So here we have another green, and it's quite a dark green. So we're going to start with that slightly, we want to make it interesting and have variation. Bring my cloth I've got way too much paint, way too much water. So let's take some of that water away. Come back, get a little bit more paint, and flow it in. Now I'm going to get that lower chroma green and bring it in and touch the edge once I get close. You can see I didn't touch the edge yet. And it's just a hint, so I want to pull that between, because I don't want to push one too far and the other one, because that's what happens when you have too much water, is the one with most water pushes into the other drier area. And that's when you can get blossoms and you can get some strange things happening. Okay. Let's come back up here and start to build some area. I like how you can just randomly work on watercolors in different places, so you can just keep going. It doesn't slow you down too much. So the burnt umber is a low chroma orange, and the green and it work really well together to lower the the chroma of the green, because it's more towards the red. It's a red orange. Okay, so I have that lovely color. I want to add a little bit more green so I can get some variation in this darker area. So I can see, now I don't want it too dark. I'm going to add a little bit of the New Gamboge to bring it to more of a yellow. And then we can see the subtle differences. And it's all just building up slowly and carefully. The secret to watercolor painting. Okay, and it comes down here. And I've got that darker low chroma green on the one side, and you can see the lighter value up here where I've added more yellows. I want to think about what I'm doing here for shapes. I have to think about that I'm coming into a place where the vein of the leaf is. The geranium leaves are really pretty. I love their undulating and their very distinct veining. It's not, it's not a, okay, so let's let that dry. And I can pull that up. I'm going to soften that edge and pull it up a little bit. Okay. So this'll definitely be the last week. Next week I'm not going to be doing the live stream because I have a commitment, and that will require my attention on Thursday. So I will be back on August the 12th, and I will be on the way, quite on the way, with the delphinium painting. I've got it drawn out. And I'm just waiting for this one to get done so I can transfer it over and get moving on it. Okay. Where's another dark area that we could focus in on? So we'll bring in that more chromatic green. And I'm just going to carefully come up to there. And I see that it comes to the edge of, and bring that down, and bring that down. So when I come to this edge here, I want it to be a little softer because I can see that it kind of pulls out into the part of the and then I'm going to take that darker chroma here and I'm going to bring that in to touch right next to the higher chroma green, so that it just touches, but it doesn't bleed in too much because it's fairly distinctive shape, which I find really fascinating. And there is a vein in there, but because we're doing it so light right now, that's going to be all right. We'll make do and it'll work. Okay, so I want to bring this shape up. I'm pushing with some paint, of some clean brush with just water. And then I'm going to come with a darker shape and I'm going to come up here. I'm looking at where that vein is. I'm going to leave it a little bit. And then come down here. Now this is fairly, like I'm going to add red on the next round because I can see that it's darker than what I have. And adding red to a green also will change the color, but it will change the chroma as well. It's pretty intense. Red is a very high chroma color. And, the red that I'm working with here the reds I've been working with, and trying to build that darkness into it. I've just been using a green, Hooker's green and phthalo green, to bring down the value of the red, so it still looks red, but it's more towards, let's add a little bit of this in here. It needs to bleed up. It's more towards the, to a darker red. You can see that, yeah. And just adding a little green. If you want to darken a color just a little bit, add the complementary. So if you want to darken a blue just a little, it's not blue dark enough, like a ultramarine blue, take a cad orange, not in watercolor. This works in, well, it works in watercolor, but you would use a different color. You wouldn't, I don't use cadmium orange. I would make an orange from a red and a yellow that are transparent, and then use that orange to bring the blue down and make it darker. It is really fascinating. So we have about 22 minutes left, and I'm just going to continue working. If you're following me right this time period, in 2020, in August 2020, I have I name the painting, and I do this regularly when I finish a painting, and naming paintings is hard, and it gives me an opportunity to let people, you guys get to help me name a painting, and I get to share some of my cards with people, and I'm always happy to do a little package out into the mail and send it off to someone. And yeah, so I have the peony is done and on Facebook. I don't have it on Instagram yet. I will get myself organized and get there. And what I'm basically doing is I get a whole raft of different name options. I write them down along with the people's names, and then I choose the best ones, and I often will go to somebody else to sort of touch base and see what they think, and give them the ones that I'm sort of thinking about, just to get a second opinion. And then I happily share the other cards that I have. So I do send out flower cards for flowers. Yeah, and it's fun. I enjoy doing it. So now I'm going to move up here, still working with that dark, and I'm really starting to think about the shape of this. Okay, bring that green that's more chromatic but still lower chroma, so it fits into here. And we're going to just come here and just, yeah, bring that down into that, where that shape is for between the veins. Touch right to the edge of, yeah. Slowly. And because I've got a vein in between, I can go to the next one that's right above it. As long as I keep that dry paint in between, then I'm all right, that dry area. But as soon as I cross that, then it would bleed in and create a problem. So I'm just bringing it and thinking about the shape here. And I'm going to grab that more chromatic green that's not much more chromatic, but just a hint more, to lighten up here. Now if you've got too much water, it won't work as well, but I can come and take some of that paint away with my thirsty brush. And I can come down and shape this a little bit narrower because the vein is not that wide. Just carefully, carefully, carefully building that up. Okay. Okay, so this should be dry here. And I forgot to soften that edge because I got away from it, but because it's not completely dry, I can just come in with a thirsty brush and soften that edge. And it's the first layer. That's just, I've hardly done any layers onto that yet. So I know that it's going to be more interesting yet. Okay, let's come back down here and let's work on this one here. Again, we're going to change that green a little bit more with some of that low chroma orange, the burnt umber. And we're going to bring that in. And then we're going to take the darker green and come down, because I can see that it's quite a darker color right at the edge here as it's coming down and moving away from the light. Okay, and I'm going to pull that up with a little bit of this. Okay, and that seems to be too dark, so I'm going to just soften it a little bit with my paintbrush, pull it down, move it around, and then I'm going to float a little bit of that red because it's being reflected from the petals. And just float it right on the side. It's just kind of like it's on the side this time. And I come with my brush and I just tickle the edge and soften it into where I want that red to be. And I'm going to come down here and I'm going to take some of that darker green because I can see it's darkening as it comes to here. Okay. Now I've got an area here that's very white, and that actually is the background, and I will fix that up at the end. Okay, so what are we looking at here? I'm looking at more of the stem. So I want to get that stem put in place. And I can see that it's not quite that dark. So take my brush, clean it off, dry it off, and move that paint around. Okay. And we're going to just right there. And I need a little bit of that yellow. I'm seeing there's a little yellow edge here. So I want to grab a little bit of that yellow to push that paint and push it towards the center more and give that lighter edge. Again, there's a little float of red there because it's so close to the petals. I don't want too much red, so I'm going to take some of it off and I'm just going to touch that in to there. So there's a little glow of red. Okay, slowly but surely we're building up. Let's do this petal up here. Taking that more chromatic but still fairly low chroma green, I'm going to put that in here. You can see that it's more green. And then I'm going to bring in the darker lower chroma green that has less green in it but is also a change of value. I'm touching the edge. I'm coming to the edge. You can see I have little white areas in there, but I don't want, I'm cleaning my brush and I'm going to move the paint around to fill in those areas. I'll come back and float some red into it when it's time, when I'm further on. I have a little bit more of that. I've got an interesting little area of dark right around here where the petal is obviously moving away from the light, even though it's not in the light. Let that dry. See where we're at. What do we have? Any other petals? No, that's going to be good. We can work on this one slowly but surely. So I put the dark on that side, and all I'm going to do is move it and thin it out so that it just is touching the edge and is, yeah. So it darkens it down, and the white area around again is dark, is background, and you know, I don't catch it all when I'm doing the masking fluid sometimes. Okay, let's take some of this dark green. We have just 12 minutes left, so I'm going to take some of this dark green and build this shape here that I see. And it's going to come around here, and you can see that the paint is getting lighter as I move away because I've not added any more paint, and it just is running out of the brush. So now I'm going to darken it by coming in with another round before. Okay. Okay. There we go. There we go. Okay. It looks like we're going to have a nice weekend, which, well, it's been so cold. Last weekend was miserable for how cold it was, so this is nice. Summer didn't abandon us completely yet. Soon enough, taking the slightly more chromatic green and bringing that in here. And oh, I see a little bit of that yellow. Let's bring that in too. We're going to just touch there. And I'm thinking about the shape, and I'm bringing my brush across and down. And then I'm going to soften the edges. Soften the edges, soften the edges. Because of course, these petals, these leaves, are, because their shape is rounded, they're capturing the light differently, and they're, just bring that green, and they're being very interesting. Yeah, they're just interesting looking. And we want to keep that shape so that we have that sense of how the light is being captured and what's creating cast shadows and stuff. Okay, moving up here. This is a fairly chromatic green, so I've added in a little bit more green, not a huge amount, just enough. Okay, there it's going. Okay. Where am I? There I am. Bring a little bit of that. I want to soften that now. I don't want to have it really dark. I want to come in and build this shape up. And I'm seeing that it has some of that yellow right at the bottom. So let's put some of that yellow in and blend it in. There we go. And it's rounder. So let's honor the fact that it's rounder. Let's go in here. I'm seeing the edge here is quite hard, so I'm just going to soften that edge. Even though it's been there for a couple of days, I can still come in and move the paint around a little bit, just enough to get rid of that line. I don't want that line to be quite so strong. And it's easier to do this now before you put another layer on and you get strange things happening. Okay, so I have to pay attention to where the vein is. And because I've wet it all, I'm not, I'm just going to come in with a very little amount of paint to get to where the shape is. And then I can come down here, leaving the vein in between. There will be some movement of the paint into it, but not a huge amount. And I'm going to come in straighter here because I can see the zigzag. I have to say I'm getting excited to get going on a new painting, as always. That's always the goal, is to get to the next painting. Sometimes it requires a lot of patience not to just move on. Okay, there we go. Okay, I'm happy with that. I'm going to soften that edge just along here because I don't want it to be so hard. And I'm going to soften this edge too, just by bringing in that little bit of water and touching it. And I can see, okay, we'll just leave that there. Bring that, touch those edges here and just soften that edge. Okay. What can we do over here? We got some of that phthalo green and yellow, the new gamboge and a little bit of areola and yellow in here, and we're just going to take a little bit of paint. A little bit of paint sometimes does exactly what you want it to do. Ooh, too much water on that. And take a little bit of phthalo. We're going to just really rev it up here with that phthalo and it's just a touch on my brush. I'm just touching the little tip of my brush to put the phthalo on. I don't want a lot of the paint on it, and I don't want a lot of, I just want a little bit so that it's brighter. Yeah. And we have some, now if I try to paint with that, you can see I can take some of it off. And I can come in over here and see where that phthalo green is really shining here. Add a little bit of the yellow to bring it down and bring that in. So there's lots of little shapes on these leaves. You can see that there's all sorts of, the light is definitely coming from this way, which you can tell on the petals. And it's really capturing the edges. And that is sometimes a challenge to keep up with. So, and this paint doesn't come off easily. So I can water this and then pull back some of the paint. Put some more water on and pull back some of that paint. I might not get it back to as light as it was. And I may then decide to make all of them be kind of the same value. We're just the last 5 minutes. This area here is very crazy. So let's go and go over here. I think you can see over here. I think they're able to see that. Hooker's green, neutral tint, and raw umber, burnt umber, the low chroma orange, to bring that chroma down, but still have it still in the green range. Okay, so I've made my 2 piles. Ooh, way too much yellow in that. So I'm gonna, it will be nice when I have a camera so you can see what I'm doing on my palette at the same time, and how I'm mixing the colors. Yes, that will come. Okay, so let's look at what we have over here happening. I can see that it's fairly dark coming in to here, and it has an interesting shape that it's coming down, and I'm going to lighten it up as it comes down. I mean, it's still fairly dark, but my layers will get me to where I want it to be. A little bit more yellow in with that higher chroma green, and bring that down. All right, and meet the edges here. I'm going to take some of that lower chroma darker green, and we're going to blend it in so that it needs to where it needs to be to give that dimensionality. Well, we're almost to the end here, so I think I'll I have time to do another little space. Let's see if we can do one that's a little further away. Let's do up here on this one. Let's look at it closely, and I can see the shape that it is. Comes right down into here. I'm going to bring a little bit of that extra yellow in and bring it up. Comes right into here. Take a little bit of the low chroma darker green, and I'm going to float it in to where the shape I'm seeing is. And there, just tickling the tip of my brush into it, and it's just pulling enough paint out to create that sort of interesting variation, because we don't want to have our things look not interesting. Okay, I think that we could wind that up today. Well, thank you for joining me today. The next time you see this, it'll be a finished painting, and I will again put it out. A reminder on Facebook, I do have the, for July until this Friday, which is like, what day is it today? Oh, that's tomorrow. July 30th, 2021. I will be choosing a name out of all the options that people have shared and ideas that they have shared for the peony painting that I've been working on a stream ago. It's completed, and I've got it scanned, and the picture's up on Facebook. I will be putting it up on Instagram. So thank you for joining me, and I will see you on August the 12th. So I will miss you next week, but August the 12th I will be back. Take care.